I've been farming for 3 years and I've made a lot of mistakes. These mistakes take a long time to develop and then they take a long time to fix. So I want to share with you 10 things that I wish that I had known before I started farming so that I can save you some time. And maybe you can tell me some things that you've learned in your journey with business and farming, wherever that may be. I'm Steven. This is Rowan Ridge Farm, and I'm talking to you from the Hackett Swamp Meat Locker in the free state of New Hampshire this evening. The first thing that I wish that I had learned was to invest in infrastructure before expanding the herd. And this may seem like an obvious thing if you've made this mistake, but when you have a fencing system, for example, that can contain 3, 4 animals, you're selling a few piglets, you got a couple of chickens, it's all working pretty well. It's very tempting to say, man, I made like a couple $1,000s on piglets this spring. What if I got twice as many sows and I had twice as many piglets? And all that seems like it's a really good idea until you have animals that are breaking things and getting out. And then when you have to move and rearrange things, you're trying to play catch up with your infrastructure, which is exponentially harder to build when you have animals in it. So I wish that I had just taken the time to build everything out fully before expanding beyond a very small operation. And being completely honest, I am still paying for some of that today, 4 years down the road, because unless you have a lot of money to get somebody professionally to come in, or you just zero out all of your animals, you have to work around and rotate and stagger and do different things. And of course, being mindful of the weather that makes a lot of these infrastructure developments very challenging at certain times of the year. You got to make the best of it until you can fix it. I started off without a tractor. And so all of the fencing that I put in was without gates. And this is avoidable, but I wish I had been thinking from a tractor perspective because everything made a lot of sense when it was just walking around with gates that are this wide for me to walk through. And now I have a tractor that's 4 feet wide and it doesn't go through any of the gates. And all the gates are in places where it's easy to walk through, but you're going down a hill. And I would never want to take a tractor through a gate, even if it was wide enough in a spot like that. That's just a suicide mission. You have to really think through your infrastructure, not just from a standpoint of the animals that you have, but also from the equipment that you have. Pick one thing and do it well. Don't try to wear too many hats. It's much better to establish a reputation through excellence than by being mediocre and offering a bunch of products. If you do one thing and you do it really well and you can satisfy your customer, because farming is about building community. Okay. Pick one thing, do it well. And when you do it well, you're going to build your community and you're going to meet the needs of the people in it. And those people will come back. Success and mistakes take time. So if you're working with an animal like a beef operation, it's going to take you at least 18 months to 2 years before you get to put your first calf that you buy and it finishes out and is ready to grow in and go in the freezer. When you eat that animal, you can say, okay, I like this. I don't like that. Maybe next time I'm going to do this. And by the time you get that process buttoned up and dialed in, you're going to be 4 or 5 years down the road before you're closing in on, okay, this is the way that I want to do this stuff. Understand that mistakes take time. And if you go in a direction that is not good, it's not something where you're just going to turn on a dime and be able to pivot. You still now have to clean up that mistake and go in a different direction. I've had pigs that I don't really love the breed, but it's taken me a couple of years to say, wait a minute, is this a one-off? Is this something that's specific to this particular animal, or is it something about the breed? And you have to take the time to follow it through. So anticipate the fact that there are mistakes that you're making that you're not going to be able to see right out of the gate because they take time to pop up. And on the flip side, there's also going to be things that you're doing right that you're not going to see right out of the gate, but it's going to take the work and the time, and understand that that is just part of the learning process to really figure out what you've done for the last 3 years, to look back on that and then say, was that a good idea or was that not? And in light of that, my next point, measure twice and cut once. Chicken math goes like this. We have room for more chickens. No big deal. Let's get them. We have room for more piglets. I like this breed. Oh, look, it's only a couple $100. Let's get a bunch of more piglets. We got room for them. Measure twice and cut once, because you always have to think about what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen here. What happens if the market changes? What happens if the weather's bad? What happens if the buyers don't show up? Are we able to support the feed bill for a couple of months to work a little harder to find buyers for the piglets or for the pork? Is that something we can do? I use my wife for this because she's a little bit more detached from the day-to-day involvement with the animals. And so she's able to look at things more objectively. So when I have an idea about like the animals, I go to her and I say, "Hey babe, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you think about it?" And she's able to step back from it because she's not all excited about it and like googly eyed over like buying some new fancy piglets. And she says, "You know what about this? What about that?" And asks me the questions to make sure that I'm actually thinking about this logically and coming at it from the glass half empty side. And then once I have her approval, it lets me know with much greater confidence, okay, you know what? If there are difficulties and challenges with this, I'm going to keep pushing and I'm not going to worry about did I do my measuring twice properly? Because I know that if I was able to get her on board with it, she tends to be more skeptical than I am about these things. Like if I was able to get her on board, there's probably some meat on the bone here, and I need to just keep pushing until we get to it, until we can figure it out. And I can have that confidence that this was the right decision and we just have to follow through and work to make it right. But that only happens if you are doing your due diligence and you are making sure that you have credible criticism that is taking place when you enter into these things from the very outset. As a small farmer, you're going to be competing with other farms. Some of them are going to be big and old, and they're going to have established market bases, and you're going to drive by them and you're going to think, man, that looks like a golf course. That is beautiful. There is more money parked in their barn than what you have in your entire property. And you think, wow, it's like a David and Goliath thing. How can I compete? Here's the thing. You're also going to be competing against farmers that are much closer to you in terms of your size and operational scope. And at the end of the day, what you're looking to do is compete where you have the advantage. Now, I've been farming for 3.5 years. There's many things that I'm learning. There's many things that I have done poorly. There's mistakes that I have made, but I'm always trying to improve sincerely. When it comes to competing with other farms, the things that I am trying to do is to compete in areas where I have a unfair advantage. So what this means is in a past life, I had a YouTube channel. I did social media. I was a public speaker. I was a writer, photographer, and somewhat of a filmmaker. So I wore a bunch of hats, including web design, and having an awareness of how search engine optimization works and how the marketing side of things works and communication and professional entities and interactions should go in a more normal environment, that is something that I have used as an advantage because when I'm competing with farmers who don't have that background, they may have a bigger herd of pigs. They may have been doing it longer. They may have a great reputation and everybody knows them. But at the end of the day, if I know how to get my website ranked on Google, nhpork.com, hey, you know what? That's going to bring people to me who are going to give me a chance because they're not out there swayed by the reputation of these other farms. They found me because I competed where I had that advantage. And everybody has some kind of advantage, even if it's, for example, I work at a hospital. Now, the people that you want to buy your product when you are a farmer are people that have to have enough means to be able to buy that product. Maybe I didn't have any of the other advantages, but I would say, okay, I'm going to start trying to go through the hospital and sell my pork to people who are there, people that work with me, right? Because I have access to a group of people who are not farmers, but these are people who don't know any of my competition. These are people who are just local and they are all interested in health. They're interested in high quality food. And so they are willing to invest money in a higher end product like what I am producing. And again, it's an unfair advantage. Everybody has these advantages. Instead of looking at where you fall short, look at the unfair advantage that you have and then press that button and go hard in that direction because that is where you're going to get the momentum. And once you have momentum, then it's a relatively simple matter to just rinse and repeat, keep that going, and then build a little bit at a time on top of that. Here's a controversial statement for you. Cash is not king. Cash flow is king. And if you disagree, please flame me in the comments. We'll argue about it. I'll make another video in response. But at the end of the day, I see a lot of videos on YouTube about how, oh, with 10 acres, you can make $150,000 with 50 pigs or whatever the numbers are. I'm a little fuzzy on some of that stuff, but there's all these pie in the sky video titles about how you can make money selling pigs, selling pork, or farming in general. And the reality is, while some of that may be accurate on some level, what you have to really be planning for is cash flow, because when you're selling pork, selling pigs and raising them, okay, maybe it's only 6, 7 months that you have to have them out there running around and growing before you can send them to the processor. But the thing you got to keep in mind is that they're not eating grass and they're not eating for free. And before you cash that check for however much you're promised by these other YouTubers, you have to figure out how to have money coming in to buy feed each month so that when you get to the end of that pipeline, your animals are in the condition that the buyers are going to want. So whenever you're doing your math for any product development, you always got to be thinking, how am I getting my cash flow to make sure I can meet monthly expenditures rather than getting bamboozled by a big dollar amount that's going to happen at the end of the line without really thinking about how are you actually going to get there month to month. Don't try to wear all the hats. In farming, there's a lot of middlemen. To take a pig, to go from a pig that's on the hoof, to go into bacon in the store, somebody's got to round those animals up, put them on a trailer, take them to the processor. The processor has to slaughter them. They have to dress them and they have to get the guts out. They have to get the skin off. Then they take them, they inspect them, they hang them in the cooler. That takes time and money. Then they have to get cut up. Then when they're cut up into the cuts that you would recognize in your frying pan, if you're talking about bacon or ham hocks, what needs to happen then is smoking and curing. Then after all that's done and slicing, don't forget slicing, then they have to get packaged and vac sealed, labeled, and then they have to get frozen and then put on a truck and taken somewhere to whoever is going to be the final buyer. There's a hell of a lot of steps there in that little bit that I rattled off, and I probably missed a handful of them. My point is, there's a lot of different hats to wear, and it can be a very romantic idea to think, oh, I'm going to raise pigs, and I'm going to butcher them myself, and I'm going to sell them, because that's what I did when I moved in here. I'm sitting in what used to be the butcher shop, and I was butchering and breeding and doing all of the different steps. Process left me with not really any more money and way, way, way less time. So I decided to outsource the butchering and give that to somebody who could do it faster and better and get rid of that headache. And at the end of the day, I'm making about the same amount of money on a pig that I'm selling for pork, but I have way more time. And so I can't always make more money on the product, but if I can make the same amount of money, but have more time, that's a big win. Don't try to wear all the hats. It's an attractive nuisance where you get sucked in and you think, ooh, I can do this for free, or I can do that for cheap, and it's going to be so much better. But then you put so much time into doing this free thing that by the time you're done with it, you're like, hell, I should have just paid the money and been able to go to bed before midnight at some point in my life, because it's miserable when you have no time and you're a slave to your animals and to your operation. Along with that, value your family and prioritize. I mentioned earlier my wife and what a valuable resource she is for me, because just from a technical farming standpoint, she is a very good sounding board, because I can ask her, how does this look? How does this sound? Pretend you don't know me and you're not a farmer and you're not invested in these pigs. I'm some Joe Schmo at a grocery store, and I come up to you and say, hey, what do you think about pastured Berkshire pork? Do you care? And are you going to spend more money on it? And she can look at that from the standpoint of somebody who doesn't care about the farm and the farming and say, okay, yeah, here's my assessment as man on the street type of thing. We got into doing this because we wanted to raise our kids to know where the food comes from, to understand responsibility and the value of life, and to understand that when you put food in your mouth to sustain your life, you are taking a life from another animal. The animal doesn't just say, okay, I'm just going to go lie down. No, you take that life. I've slaughtered enough animals to tell you, you have to be prepared. You are taking life. It is very forceful. It is very direct. There's no way to pussyfoot around it. You are taking a life to supplement your own. They trade their life in exchange for yours. And that's just the way that it is. And we wanted our kids to be able to have some understanding of this, as well as business and the environment of being in a more rural area and community that we feel is more healthy. It's very easy to get sucked into all the little hat wearing and all the little nuances of farming with sick animals, having babies, emergencies happen, things break, equipment breaks, new equipment, stuff that you have to borrow, weather goes south. I could go on. There's so many different things to get involved in. And a lot of times it's easy to forget about your family, and you got to put them first, because if your family doesn't come first and they're not on board, and sometimes you have to be able to say, listen, babe, I'm not going to be in until 2. I'm going to be in there pulling piglets because I'm going to have my arm shoulder deep in a sow's nether regions because they're stuck piglets. And that's what we got to do. And you got to make sure that your family is on board for that kind of stuff from the outset, so that when those things inevitably happen, they're willing to be on board for it. The flip side is, don't take advantage of that and say, oh, if you can handle it once, it's going to become a thing all the time because we're just going to be grasping at straws. Have some limitations that protect your family and your family time. Farming, like every business, it is serving the customers, it is serving the community, it is building relationships. If you think from the standpoint of your customers, how you can serve them, how you can give them what they need, how you can meet their needs, they are going to come back to you. And as I was talking about earlier with competing where you have an advantage, customer service, no matter how much smaller you are than your competition, if you can serve somebody and you can meet their need, they will come back to you. And then you have built a relationship. Farming is not something that happens immediately. There's no quick fix to this stuff. There's no virality. Sometimes there's a shortage over here, and maybe you pick up a few people because you have a few extra when everybody else is empty handed. That stuff certainly happens from time to time. But at the end of the day, if people like the way you treat them and they like doing business with you, and you're a straight shooter and you care about meeting their needs, they're going to come back to you and you're going to have a good business. Build relationships with everything that you do. And lastly, be careful who you trust, because while you want to build relationships, you also want to make sure that you're building relationships that are worth building, worth protecting, with people who are straight shooters and who are going to give you the same respect that you are giving them. Small farming is a small world, and there is a small pool of consumers that are buying from us. And one of the things that I learned is that there's quite a few people in small farming where they will say things to your face with a smile and good to meet you. And all that's really cool. Beautiful setup, nice operation. And they'll go back behind your back and they'll try to swipe your customers, undercut you, and do everything that they can, because there is a mindset of desperation to a certain extent. And I'm not poking sticks at anyone personally. I'm just saying, in the small farming world, this idea that I got to get, because if I don't, I'm going to be out and my animals are going to starve because I got no money coming in, because the small farmers are competing with each other instead of competing with the grocery stores. And that all has to do with the USDA and government regulations. Leave me a comment if you hear what I'm talking about, because I am going to make another video about that topic in particular. But just understand that while you want to think that everybody is like Jed Clampett and that everybody is your friend and they want to see you succeed, many people, in fact, want you to fail spectacularly, but they won't tell you that to your face. They'll just kind of like, oh yeah, that's interesting. You're planning on getting a whole bunch more pigs and putting them on 1 acre. And well, it's wetlands here. That'll be interesting. Okay, good. Hey, that sounds like a great plan. Yeah, good luck with that. Hey, nice operation. See you around. And they'll let you run your operation into the ground. There's a saying that like farmers that live more than 1 or 200 miles away from each other, they'll give each other the greatest information. They'll be so helpful. They'll give each other like all of this stuff. I have some mentors and some great friends in the world of pig farming, and they're all from 500 miles away all over the country. And these are people that if I have a question, I know I can go to them and be like, hey, listen, what should I do in this situation? Because they're not going to say, oh yeah, shoot yourself in the foot. It'll feel great. It's not going to be a problem. They're going to give me the straight dope, and they're going to say, here's what you need to be doing. Here's why, here's how. And they're actually going to help you. A lot of times people in your own community, you're not going to have that same level of generosity there, because they see you as competition, even if it's not a intentional thing. It's just the dynamics I found them to be here. And that's something that I think you should be aware of. Guys, if any of this stuff was interesting to you, I want to hear your opinions, your take on some of these things. What are the things that you have learned in this process that you wish you knew earlier? What are the things that I missed? Tell me, subscribe to the channel. We're going to have more videos, shorts, longs. Look forward to talking to you and look forward to making more videos and talking to you guys here from the Hackett Swamp Meat Locker in the free state of New Hampshire. This is Stephen from Rowan Ridge Farm. Have a good night.